Well, since the beginning of time, people have been predicting its end. And now it seems the doomsayers have a date to work towards. A simple glitch is threatening a new age of chaos the second the world's computers click over to the year 2000.
New Jersey scientists helped to prepare the world's biggest physics experiment for its first test run, which took place earlier today, and are now eager to see it in full-scale operation.
Warning. The County Weather Service has issued a warning for a meteorological event. This warning is effective immediately and continues until sunrise tomorrow morning.
The Large Hadron Collider was designed to shed new light on the origin and nature of the universe. Science and technology correspondent Patrick Regan reports.
You've probably heard this, that according to an ancient Mayan prophecy, the world will end in late 2012.
So the end of the world, or apocalypse, or end times, whatever you want to call it, it's something that is pretty interesting to think about when you kind of take a deep dive into, you know, what the end of the world could look like. You know, it's kind of scary also because, you know, we don't know what's going to happen, you know, whether you believe in the Christian, idea that the end of the world is going to be the rapture, you know, when Jesus Christ comes back, or whether you think it's going to be a nuclear war that's going to, you know, take us out, or whether you think it's, you know, just going to be a natural cause of things that basically causes the world to reset. Everything gets flooded, everything, you know, burns up. We have to move planets. Whatever the case may be that you think of, it's pretty interesting when you kind of think about times when the world was supposed to end, but didn't. It's kind of cool to go back and look at some of these. So today, we're going to be looking at some of these quote-unquote end time predictions. Times when the world was supposedly supposed to end that it ended up never ending. These happen probably every year, if I'm being completely honest nowadays. Basically, each year, you know, you go on the internet, you go on social media, you'll see probably a post about the end times, whether it be, you know, Christians who are, you know, way too into their beliefs that they think the world is ending now, you know, that there are signs, you know, it could be small signs, big signs, whatever the case may be, or whether it be people who supposedly read this note that basically happens, or whatever the case may be. You know, you see it everywhere. So we're going to go back and look at some of the bigger ones that happened over the past 20, 30 years or so. Y2K. Alright, so back in the 90s, computers were still wearing their baby clothes. They weren't like nowadays how you can get a computer and it can pretty much do anything that you want. It was a lot less, you know, tech savvy back then. Things cost more money, they weren't as easy to use, they weren't as easy to figure out. Basically, they were honestly garbage, if I'm being completely honest. Now, with Y2K, basically how to kind of describe it to you guys is when you looked at the date on a computer, or whatever the case may be, basically there was a shortcut that stated the year as just the last two digits. So, for example, in 1989, instead of it saying 1989, it only said 89. So it did this, you know, it did this for every year from whenever the first computers were made or when they figured this out until, you know, I guess obviously Y2K happened. But basically, eventually the year 2000 was coming up, and obviously people weren't really sure because it's going from, you know, it's not just another year, it's going from, you know, 1990 or 1900s to the 2000s. What's going to happen? Now, of course, there were tons of theories and stuff that, you know, that the world was going to end entirely when it hit 2000. Some people believe that it just had nothing to do with technology. Some people believe that it had to do with the fact of just the world was going to end. You know, that's just how people really thought. But a lot of people were extremely worried that the computer glitch was going to basically cause a bunch of catastrophes around the world. You know, people weren't really quite prepared for it, and they put, I think, billions of dollars into preventing this whole thing from happening, preventing, you know, all of these structures and stuff from falling. So, you know, people were worried about the banks. They calculated, you know, interest rates for people, stuff like that. You know, obviously going from the year 2000, or going from 1999 to the year 2000, you know, it's not like it registered as 2000, it registered as 1900. So, you know, computer wasn't nearly as smart as it was nowadays. You know, it would have obviously been an issue because interest rates would have gone from, let's just say, percentage, you know, 20% then it would have gone down for minus almost 100 years. So it's really, you know, weird. You know, obviously banks would go crashing down, money market would crash and stuff like that. And it would have been just a huge problem. Now, airlines as well were put at a risk. You know, computers had records of everything, you know, recorded schedule, flights, you know, obviously on the actual navigation of the plane, it, you know, gave certain dates and times and whatnot. And if this would have happened to those airlines, they, you know, predicted that airlines would go crashing down. People's flights would be all messed up, you know, times and dates would just basically all fall apart when this happened. You know, if there's a airplane in the sky, they predict that when the actual midnight hit, that the plane malfunctioned and basically they would crash into each other, crash into the cities, crash into the grounds, wherever the case may be. They thought that it would crash, and obviously it would be pretty bad, you know, if a bunch of planes all of a sudden came crashing down. Now, admittedly, this is probably one of the biggest concerns. I will give this to, you know, the world back then, or basically any sort of power plant. You know, whether it be water, nuclear, you know, it had anything to do with farming or food or stuff like that. You know, basically they got to the time where the computer did routine checks on maintenance. Basically, they would check, you know, make sure there's no leaks, make sure the pressure on everything looks good, make sure the air looks good, radiation, stuff like that, make sure that everything is sealed nice and tight. And if it started messing up and not doing what it was supposed to do, then obviously, you know, let's say there's a radiation leak. Next thing you know, there's an explosion, you know, just like what happened with Chernobyl. You know, that could have happened then, you know, but it could have been all the plants, you know, it could have been a, you know, water plant busted and basically water gone everywhere, and then mixed with the radiation slush, and just a whole bunch of bad things would have not been very cash money had, you know, the glitch affected as much as it did. Now, like I said, billions of dollars were put into basically making sure that none of this happened, because obviously, why wouldn't you want to try to prevent something that, you know, why wouldn't you want to try to prevent something, you know, when you can prevent it from happening? Obviously, something like the other end of the world catastrophes that we're going to look at, obviously you can't really do anything about that because it might be natural or, you know, godly, whatever the case may be. But why wouldn't you try to do that? Now, of course, obviously, we're still here. Nothing major happened. So, you know, a lot of people actually look back and laugh at it. I think it's now a joke and stuff like that nowadays. But back then, when you were in the moment, it was kind of a big deal. And obviously, with media, even back then, media did not help anything. Media just made things and blew it up. You know, if you read an article, world ending at year 2000, you're going to be like, wow, that sucks. You're not going to want to look at anything else. But obviously, it didn't happen, and we're still here in the year 2024. Harold Camping. So Harold Camping was a radio preacher from California, and basically he got super popular off of predicting ends of the world, particularly one that happened in 2011. Now, there were some in between. I think there was one in 2007 that was also predicted, but this is kind of the bigger one. We're looking at kind of the bigger ones. Like I said, every year there's a new end of the world story, but we're gonna be looking at the bigger ones. Yeah, so this is honestly probably the biggest one that happened in between Y2K and the 2012 incident. So basically what this guy would do is that he would basically study numerology. You know, he would study numerical patterns in the Bible. He basically got a reputation for this, and obviously with him being also a radio station operator, he had kind of a big way to reach people. He believed that, you know, if the numbers on scripture in the Bible, whatever, offered a hidden code, you know, and obviously if you knew what to look for, if you knew what numbers, what signals, stuff like that to look for, that the Bible actually predicts a exact date for the end times, you know. Now, in the case of the Bible, it would be the rapture, you know, or when Jesus Christ comes back to earth, and basically all of the you know, worshippers are brought up into heaven. Meanwhile, the world basically burns in flames. You know, whatever you want to see, however you want to see the end of the world in terms of Christianity. Basically the end times were coming. We're going to be brought up into heaven, and then the world would basically burn. So he basically did this a lot. He apparently predicted the end of the world like almost, what, 12 plus times, again based off of his biblical numerology. However, I think the biggest one that happened, or the one that's most well known, was in 1992. He published a book called 1994 ? And basically he predicted the end of the world sometime around that year. However, obviously in 1994 it didn't happen, but then he predicted the world in on May 21st, 2011. Apparently he somehow got it. I don't know the exact specifics of it, but it was apparently 7,000 years after the biblical flood, and I guess that he assumed that on that day there would be another flood, or maybe the end times would finally come from Revelations. Now, of course, the date came and went. Nothing went wrong. He then declared his math to be off and then pushed the end of the world to October 21st, 2011. Yeah, kind of a big oopsie. So obviously this guy wasn't, you know, correct, and he unfortunately passed away, and he apologized for, you know, his wrong, I guess, his wrong mathematics. So yeah, obviously in 2011 the world never came to an end, and even in 1994 when he originally did his book, the world didn't end then. So basically he's wrong. He was wrong, what, at least 3 times. That's just 3 times that I've talked about. There's no telling how many more times that dude was incorrect. You know, it's kind of interesting, you know, going back and looking at some of these. There's a lot of Christian, you know, I guess they're conspiracy theorists. I don't know what you would call them. There's a lot of Christians, you know, people who are, you know, like this guy was a radio preacher. There's another one. Basically he was a Christian conspiracy theorist. It's really interesting how they'll look at something in the Bible and they'll go, you know what, that shows what's going to happen whenever their supposed date happens. It's just really interesting how people look into it, and some of it might happen. You know, I know that there has been some accurate things that were in the Bible that did happen in real life. I do understand that. I understand that there's some things that were accurate, but I don't know, it's really interesting. You know, some of these things, we don't know what they say. We don't know what they mean, whether it is, you know, purely just a kind of mental thing to think about, you know, kind of a life lesson, or whether it's a literal thing, you know, metaphor, literal. We don't know. And it's just interesting to see how some of these people kind of look at the Bible and they do their number stuff, you know, whatever. They do their numerology. I don't know how that works. And then they come to a decision like that. It's just kind of interesting. 2012 Mayan calendar. So this is admittedly probably the biggest supposed end of the world event to ever happen ever. There's even a movie made about it, and I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty terrified of it back when I was a kid and I saw the 2012 movie. I was terrified, okay, of the world ending. Basically, the 2012 incident, there was a Mayan calendar, and basically it spans from like 3000-ish BC, and basically the end of the cycle was supposedly December 21st, 2012. Basically, it was like 5,000-ish years, and basically they did like cycles for the Mayan calendar. I don't know exactly, but I guess it's kind of like years for us. I don't know. I could be wrong, but basically the calendar, you know, basically went as far as 2012, and then it would reset at the end of the 13th cycle. Now, I'm not really too sure. Apparently there was a stone tablet that was found on an on a site, okay? Basically there was, you know, a stone tablet found on a site, and apparently the initial interpretation was that a god will descend to the, I guess, planet at the end of the 13th cycle. And what would happen next is uncertain. Now, obviously, if God were to come down to Earth, you know, depending on who you believe in and whatnot, it would be pretty scary, you know, and probably the end of the world would be happening. That's just the way it is. Now, apparently, I don't know, like I said, again, media has a way with things. They take something and basically blow it up to the basically the highest amount of worry in the world. Apparently this actually had nothing to do with the end of the world. Basically it was word spread and stuff like that. And apparently, I guess, like the actual description of it, basically it had to do with some sort of rare astronomical alignment. Which, okay, cool. You know, it was definitely kind of weird, for sure, but you know, that's basically where they got it from. They got it from that, and I guess maybe they heard, you know, rare astronomical alignment. They, you know, assumed, oh, well, that would be the sun burning us alive, or something like that. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Now, the movie basically tackles this. We'll go over, of course, obviously, it's a movie. It's not real, but basically with the movie there's a huge flood, there's fires, there's, I think, a new like ice age happening, all sorts of things. And it honestly wasn't really that good of a movie, but it was scary to think about, and it was scary to actually watch, especially if you're a kid. It was definitely pretty terrifying watching it when I think it came out in like 2011, so I was 10 years old. So watching it at 10 years old, it was definitely scary. Planet X is going to be Planet X. Basically, Planet X was started by, well, I don't know if it was started by, but it was basically brought up by a Christian conspiracy theorist known as David Meade. Basically, David Meade, he created tons and tons of theories about it and stuff like that. He basically would constantly, you know, create these different theories and stuff like that because he described himself as a quote-unquote Christian numerologist. Again, we're looking at this again, where people look at different numbers and signals and stuff, and they basically can somehow get a date and events that are going to happen. It's really weird how these people do this, honestly. So his constant like conspiracy theory was about this Planet X, also known as Nibiru, that basically was a hidden planet in our solar system that hadn't been found, or that the government and stuff were not telling us about it. But basically, he first predicted in 2017 that he basically the end of the world would happen in 2017. Now, originally it was October-ish, but then he moved it up to September However, obviously nothing in September happened. So there's that. Now, of course, he then changed his mind again and said no, it wasn't going to happen. So, like I said, he moved it back to October. He made a bunch of new predictions for October of 2017 in particular. The first one was that Nibiru was going to eclipse the sun, and that several people would quote-unquote levitate into the sky, which I guess that means kind of like the rapture that you see in typical media, where the Christians, you know, get their clothes removed and they go up into the air floating and stuff like that. So that's interesting. Then apparently he followed that a nuclear attack would then happen on the US from other countries, which I guess that would be kind of like the hellish earth that they say that the world might turn into after the rapture. But obviously none of that happened. He also predicted that a series of magnitude 9.8 earthquakes would hit the earth and multiple cities. Obviously, I don't think that ever happened. Yeah, I don't think it ever happened. Apparently the Earth's pole would shift by 30 degrees, and I guess in doing that, it would cause the United States to be split in half. Now, these are all kind of ridiculous, if you ask me. And that's just me, though. But apparently there was also many more, like, some of them had to do with politics, and then some of them had to do with, you know, like a supposed Great Tribulation, which I guess would be like 7 years of the world ending, like a slowly over time. Obviously, none of that stuff happened, clearly. And once again in 2018, he then predicted the end of the world yet again with this Planet X. Now, this one in particular actually kind of blew up for a little bit. I remember there was a couple videos that people made about, you know, the supposed end of the world back around this time in April of 2018. I don't know if it started with this guy or if it just kind of blew up from there. Like I said, social media, they like to blow things up. They tend to blow things up quite a bit, if you know, ask me personally. But in 2018, basically he predicted that, like I said, yet again, that Nibiru would come and destroy Earth. So this time in particular, he predicted that the Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Virgo would basically all kind of sync or line up together, that basically would, I guess, signal the rapture, and then Nibiru would come destroy the Earth later that day. It's kind of like a bunch of guys hanging out, and they're like, "Hey, bro, you know, we got this spot saved for you. Come on down and hang out." Yeah, no, that's not really how it works. Now, of course, this wasn't just out of the blue. This wasn't like he did a couple math equations and stuff like that. Apparently, his theory traces back to a biblical passage from Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, which they refer to a great sign appearing in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as if she was about to give birth, I guess. Now, obviously, none of this happened. Kind of awkward. I don't know how these guys do this, how they, you know, just throw this out here, and they're just like, oh, yeah, actually, no, never mind. And then what's funny about it is, apparently, you know, these were some fake news, and it was then pushed back in between May and December of 2018. Apparently, he stated that the rapture would bring 7 years of tribulation, and then 1,000 years of peace, and then the world would be destroyed. Well, I think, what is it, 2018, so what, we're 6 years? Maybe another year. Maybe he was correct. Maybe we have another year of tribulation, and then we will be followed by 1,000 years of peace. But I really don't believe this guy at all, because he's had way too many predictions. Large Hadron Collider. So those who don't know what exactly the Large Hadron Collider is, basically it is created by CERN. Basically the operation started on September 10th, 2008, and people were very scared that the world was going to end. Apparently they thought that a black hole would form and devoured the Earth. So for those who don't know what it does, it basically is a the world's most powerful accelerator that basically will throw protons and all these different particles at each other at the speed close of light, and basically they collide with each other, and then they produce these larger particles that then we can discover basically a whole new forms of science that we didn't even know about. It's basically a nice way for you to test different predictions and theories on different particle physics, stuff that we can learn as, you know, as humans, and basically use to improve upon and basically discover, you know, new ideas that we didn't even know about. So obviously, due to forms of media and stuff like that, we didn't even know what would happen, you know, if two particles were thrown at each other at such a high rate of speed. Basically, people were afraid. And of course, when it kicked on, nothing happened, okay? Or everything went smoothly, should I say. Nothing happened, but everything went smoothly. No black hole was formed that instantly devoured the Earth. However, there have been theories that the world did technically end, and that we are in a new quote-unquote timeline of the world. Basically, that's why kind of everything has gone to hell, especially in the last few years. But of course, I think they've kicked on the Large Hadron Collider a couple of times, and so I don't think it's necessarily the 2008 incident that, or 2008 time when they cut it on, that people are kind of assuming with this. So, I mean, obviously, if you watch different forms of media and whatnot, movies, TV shows, whatever, you would know that, you know, things happen on this unrealistic thing. I believe in the Flash TV show, they used a Hadron Collider, or was it the particle accelerator? I can't remember. Basically, they used similar technologies to it, and it opened portals to other dimensions, other timelines and whatnot. And people do believe that we are in a new timeline because they believe that CERN has basically opened up gateways and portals to other times, other worlds, other dimensions, and what have you. And of course, the biggest theory is that the world did actually end, and that we are all in limbo. So yeah, it's kind of scary to think about, that we could all potentially be in limbo because they wanted to throw a couple of particles at each other. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. But honestly, I have to say that this one's probably my favorite quote-unquote end of the world scenario, or end of the world, you know, time when the world was going to end but never did. It is honestly probably my favorite one because it's really cool to think about, especially like thinking about like, what if they open up a black hole, they have control over going into black holes, and that there are other dimensions that we can access. And it's just terrifying and also super cool to think about, and it's just really, really interesting, honestly. So yeah, that's those were some of the times when the world was supposed to end and they never did. This was honestly a really fun video to put some research in and stuff. This was the first video where I actually like kind of made a script. I'm pretty proud of myself. Most of the videos I go in and I just kind of wing it. This time around I actually made some script with some notes and stuff like that. So I feel pretty good about this, and I really enjoyed making this video. Like I said in the beginning, just doing and thinking about the world ending is just really kind of scary, but also intriguing. You know, what if all of a sudden a big asteroid the size of Jupiter comes our way? Like imagine how scary that would be. Or all of a sudden a black hole magically formed, you know, and came out of nowhere. That would also be pretty interesting, you know? A black hole just formed, you know? We don't know what's going to happen, especially with the pictures of the black hole that were taken 2 years ago. I don't remember. You know, you look at that and you're like, wow, that's pretty terrifying to look at, and pretty interesting to look at as well. But it's just, I don't know, like I said, these scenarios, these times, you know, and obviously I think a lot of people, we expect it to not end, but then it's one of those things that's like, well, what if it does? You know, it's like anticipation. Like, what if it does? It's like when you're watching a movie and you know the main character's not supposed to die, but you think to yourself, like, what if the main character dies? What if? That would be really cool and really interesting and really sad, but it would be interesting if they did that. So yeah, what do you guys think? Do you guys think this is more scary? Do you guys think this is more cool, like I do? Do you guys believe any of these? Did you guys, you know, never believe in any of these? If you were old enough to, of course, remember some of these. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about it. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like. I do appreciate it, and hit that subscribe button if you feel like it. I can't make you do anything. And yeah, if you guys enjoy this type of content, let me know so I can continue to do it. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Peace out.